Welcome to the Rooted in Light podcast. I am your host, Tuesday Rivera, and I'm here today with Beya Jiménez, and we are going to talk about the Akashic Records. So, Beya, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Tuesday. Happy to be here.
Yes. So, friends, I invited Beya to this podcast and asked if she would come on to talk with me about their records because Beya is not only a good friend and someone I admire in community, but she is also part of the Luminosity cohort. And so we've been spending quite a bit of time together in that program. And so I was like, who do I want to talk about these records with? Who can we go back and forth? Who's interesting? Who would my podcast audience like to hear from? And so I was like, Beya, let's do it. So Beya, welcome. And I'm so glad you're here. And maybe we can start. So this is going to be an Akashic Records podcast, like overview, right? So here's how it's going to work, friends. Beya and I are going to talk a little bit about the records. We're going to take a break. I'm going to read Beya's records because that's nobody's business. And then we're going to come back after the records reading and chat a little bit and kind of wrap it up. So that's what we're up to today. So Beya, maybe I'll ask, why do you want to do an Akashic Records reading now?
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy that I received this invitation. And we worked together last year to pull my records during a moment where I needed to make a decision.
Mm.
And I was weighing out options, and this felt like the right moment to do so with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just such a great guiding tool. And so it's been about a year. And so receiving this invitation felt timely to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing about the records, right? Like it's often we're kind of faced with a decision or a circumstance or something ahead of us or even like something we've been in a long time and it just feels time for deeper guidance. It's almost like, all the ways we think about it in our head, all of the conversations we've had, all the ways we've like cut it, all the different ways. It's like not quite enough. And we just are seeking some deeper guidance. And that's how I feel like the records can be the most useful. I think about them on those places that we're stuck or places that we know our habits of mind or our habits of behavior might be kind of getting us to the exact same place. And we just kind of need a recalibration. Um, I think the records are great for that. So maybe for those of folks who don't know what the records are, I will kind of share how I understand them. And Beya, I just invite you to either jump in, how
Yeah.
you understand your experience, or ask me questions because I am aware that when we say the Akashic Records,
Mm-hmm.
not everyone knows what they are, and it's a little
Mm-hmm.
strange, and so I keep trying to figure out how to describe them to people. So I have two ways of describing them. Well, first I'll kind of say the Akashic Records um, are a spiritual imprint. See, this is where it gets a little hard to even start talking about them. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you even start? They are a recording of your soul's journey from its inception. And actually, they are a recording of all souls' journeys since their inception. So it is like a record of every being's thought, deed, action, word from their inception. And it's a little bit like, um, it's still being written, right? So it's not like your future is set in this record and we just go into the records and see your future, right? Every decision you make is recording onto the records. And so that decides what will happen next and that will decide what happens next. So it's not a predetermined kind of thing. We're not going and looking at your future. We are looking at your
Mm-hmm.
soul's journey and trying to get guidance from it. So please, you got
Yeah, a
something there?
question there popped up for me, which
Great.
is for those of us who might be very familiar with like tarot card readings, how
Mhm.
would you differentiate those two?
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for asking. So the tarot is a specific tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of getting information. I would say how I understand the records is that the tarot may be pulling information from the records and the records are a different tool. So I had just last week in the luminous community, someone said, here's the analogy they gave it. They said, it's like there's a big lake of knowledge, and the ladle could be the tarot cards that you pull the water out of, or it could be the Akashic records that you pull the water, or you could do, any number of ways of getting them. Um, and so that's a way to think about it. I thought that was a beautiful analogy that different wisdom traditions can have their ladles and they get into them different ways. I think some people might say the lake is the Akashic records versus
Uh-huh.
the records being a ladle. I tend to think about them, and Beya, I know you're younger than me, but here's the
Mhm.
thing that makes the most sense to me. Like old school library. Like the first time I lived in the country, and so the first time I ever drove myself, so nerdy, I drove to the
I love it.
library. I got my driver's license and I drove to the library, right? That was I was so nerdy. But that is what I think of the records are. And it's like this huge library that has all of this information. And I think, part of what we'll do is we'll access the records through a prayer. And I think about like that prayer gets us into the library. And as we're saying the prayer, I will say your name. And that saying your name tells us what room we want to go to in the library. And then once we get into the room, you'll ask questions, and that tells us what book to pull down, right? So it feels very kind of progressive to me like that. There's this huge library, it has all of our records. We get into it through a prayer, we get into the right space through our name, and then we get the answers because we ask certain questions. So that's one way I describe it, is like this huge library. Now, a lot of people call it a database, but look, I'm not great at that. And I like Excel is the bane of my existence. And so like database, but if that's helpful for people, think about it like that. Another way I think about it for me is it's another realm. And that can
Uh-huh.
feel kind of far out or hard to understand. But, we go to another realm when we dream. Like our dreams can
Yes,
be
we
thought of,
do.
right? So it's not like dreaming, but it's the same idea. We can go someplace. It's not a physical place. Like dreams aren't physical places, but we can go someplace and we can gather information to support ourselves. And so that's what the records are. They are a repository of information where we can go and gain wisdom and perspective, and speak with our guides and get a deeper, um, more, for me, a more symbolic support for our efforts. So, how's
That's
that
so
land?
helpful. That is so helpful. That is so helpful.
Great, great. So, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how are the Akashic records different from intuition? And
Mhm.
you've had a reading, so I'm going to answer, but then I'm going to ask if you have a sense of how it might be different.
Uh-huh.
So, because we have intuitive gifts and we have deep intuition, and so how are the records getting information different? So I have two ways I think about it. One is that when I'm tapping into my intuition, it feels like I'm tapping into something inside of myself, like a deeper voice. The records feel like information is coming from outside of me, that I'm actually kind of pulling information into my knowing versus kind of tapping into a knowing I already have. For me personally, my intuition is like super practical. Like, do this, don't do that. $5 here, da da. It's like actually quite practical. For me, the records are a little more symbolic. They're a little more um, give me guidance on a meta level versus you should do this tomorrow kind of level. So those are kind of the two things I have found different in records and intuition. But I'm curious if you might have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I relate very much to what you're using, the words you're using, symbolic, kind of meta, almost like a philosophical take on the practicality and kind of nuance of what's happening in my world. And so, intuition for me, we also often think about it as that gut feeling that you get. And there's almost like a body sensation
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to tap into, that I've learned to tune into. Whereas when I'm tapping into the records with you, it almost feels like I'm calling in my counsel. And this
Yes.
counsel
Yes.
could be my
Yes.
ancestors and other spirit guides that have been called in as, "Hey, can I
Yeah.
get a moment with you?" You
Right.
know? That's what that
Right.
feels like.
Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad you said that because that is right. We're calling in guides. We're actually asking for help, which I think is a humbling thing to do as a human being. Sometimes intuition can be a little bit around self-reliance. Like, and that's beautiful. Like tapping into that deep wisdom we have inside ourselves is beautiful. It's not to negate that. But there is actually something amazing about asking for help, calling in your guides, like being with them directly. I want to say, and I want to go into the guides in a moment, but I do want to say that everyone reads records differently. So some people, so we're talking about how, we've read the records together. For me, records come in as images, as short phrases, as impressions. Other people do sometimes do this at 5 o'clock next Thursday. That's not how they come
Uh-huh.
in for me. That's not the kind of reader I am. They come in, of course, through yourself. So that's kind of not the kind of person I am, I guess. So they don't come into me that way. But you could find a records reader who's a little bit more like practical directive. That's just not how the records come in for me. So I just want to hold that open for people. But the thing about I want to go back to the guides because you said something really important that I think that we talk a lot about connecting with our ancestors. We talk sometimes about angels or um, guides. And for me, the Akashic Records are like a very clear place you can ask for that. You can ask your ancestors to join you. You can ask, and they may or may not. They're not often going to come in and be like, I'm your grandmother, and here's what I want you to know,
Mhm.
right? But there
Mhm.
will be ancestral wisdom that comes in. And so it feels like a really good tool to be able to be in connection. Like you said, calling in your counsel. It's like they are there, your guides, whether they're your ancestral guides, whether they are teachers you have learned from in this life or others,
Yes.
whether they are beings who have just agreed to guide your soul, they want to be helpful, right? That is what they're here to
Mhm.
do, love you and be helpful. And so when we access the records, it's not only asking for help, we are helping them do the thing they want to do, right?
I love that. Yeah, that actually feels very affirming hearing it placed in that way because then it does feel like another tool for spiritual support, right? That can
Mhm.
go beyond spiritual support. I love framing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bea, I'm curious, because
Mhm.
I always say like, so I'm a reader. I'll talk about that role in a minute, I guess. But my goal is never to be a gatekeeper. So my hope is that when we go into the records, you also get more connected with your guide so that you don't necessarily, I mean, like,
Mhm.
it's always great to have a records reader. I get my records read, right? Because I can read them for myself, but it's great for me to have somebody else read them because it's a different connection. But my hope is that people learn to actually build a connection with their guides. And so I'm curious what that's been like for you in terms of calling in your counsel, what that looks like either with the records or in other ways.
Absolutely. I think this is like another tool in my toolbox. But a regular way for me is sitting at my altar.
Mm.
I mentioned tarot. Tarot has been a very powerful tool in my life, especially in moments of duress, where
Mm.
I'm
Ah.
feeling that I might have that intuitive pull and I'm still kind of teetering along and I'm feeling like I could use that extra pull. And that's where tarot has often helped
Mm.
me understand messages in my life and call in those guides as we've been sharing. So, sitting at my altar in prayer, that intuitive pull, absolutely.
Mhm.
Learning my own body wisdom so that I understand what to know, what to yes. And even one of the most profound lessons I learned recently was a lot of my maybes were actually no's that I was
Yeah.
scared to say no to.
Uh-huh.
And so that's
Uh-huh.
been such a wonderful guide. And of course, the tarot cards and having a trusted person that I can work with the last few years has been so transformative
Mm.
to really rely on that as a tool and as another way to call in that support.
All right, this is related for me. It might feel like a left turn, but I want to ask you
Let's
because
see.
of course, I know you
Uh-huh.
in this way, right? So you're in the luminosity cohort, we've done records readings, but I also know you have a life
Uh-huh.
outside of some of this spiritual practice that may not um it's like a strategic like getting stuff done in the world life. And I'm curious
I love
um
that.
how you like if so I guess let me ask a different way. So some folks might be tuning in and being like, I don't know, this is really far out. I don't like they're
Uh-huh.
talking about a different realm, they're talking about
Oh,
spirit guides. I know I have had some of that. Like, is this too woo-woo? I
for
always tell the
sure.
story of, like, I walked into my team and I'm like, "I'm getting weirder. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but this is what's happening." I'm curious how you make sense of this in your life,
Yeah,
this part, and if it feels separate or how you kind of work with it.
absolutely. I think in trying to answer your question, I'll start by saying this. I do my best to rely on those tools that allow me to practice a consistency with them.
Mm,
So I mentioned like my altar keeping and sitting in prayer. Those are consistent practices that I've built up over time.
mm,
I'm not at the stage where I'm consulting tarot daily, although I
uh-huh,
do know friends in my life that do, and that's their prayer, that's what works for them.
mm,
And so I guess what I venture to say is that it's okay to start with like a daily practice that perhaps is just you in
uh-huh,
meditation with yourself, and then that might invite you into doing more.
right.
I try not to do everything at once. I
Mm,
think in the moments where I've done that, it's because I was avoiding the decision on something or I was avoiding the reality
mhm,
of something. Like, it's like I
mhm.
can go back to the tarot, I can do the Akashic record, I can sit in the prayer, and the decision is still like, I still gotta go and make it.
Right,
Right? And so
right, right,
so it
right.
was like, I'm not
Mm,
consulting at that point. At that point, I'm just almost like avoiding or trying to not face almost like the inevitable decision that I need to make.
yes.
And so I've learned to kind of understand when I'm trying to seek all of these tools, like, let me focus on this consistent daily practice that actually may not involve much. It might just be the 10, 20 minutes, if that, that I might have in the morning or right before bed to just sit in prayer. And oftentimes that can be more than enough. And then there might be seasons like this one where I'm seeking records because I know I've given time to those consistent practices where, like, now if I go and
Right.
ask for this additional support, I will likely receive it and it will be abundant. Um, to pair with the knowledge that I'm receiving on my daily practice. So I hope that makes sense, but that's what's worked for me.
I think that is I mean, you just nailed something. I think that is so smart. I think that these tools can get ungrounded or ungrounding when we're using them to escape, right?
Yes.
When we're like, "I don't really wanna do this thing, I wanna kind of get a magic answer," right? That then begins to like, that's when they're ungrounded or, woo-woo or whatever we wanna say. But when they actually turn us toward what's in front of us, help us and support us and guide us to make decisions or take action in a way that feels wise and informed, right?
Yes.
That's the thing, right? But if we're just kind of using them like if it's like a psychic slot machine, oh, let me just pull the lever and see what comes up today, or you know what I mean? Like that's I
Uh-huh.
think that's where they can get really ungrounded and it can feel um yeah, yeah, just kind of
And I do think that you need to have a reverence for this too.
yeah.
Like, I can get really serious about that. I
Uh-huh.
do think that being able to start with a daily practice will guide you to so many other things. And it
Mm,
might be messages like, let me open myself up to this medium and see how that works. And like I said, and for many folks in my network, tarot has been able to provide that. And then that might lead them into other things, right? And so I think for me, I do try to keep an open mind.
mhm.
And so there is some curiosity that I've been able to build in. And I do have some reverence on the how and the when and how
Right.
often.
Right. I really appreciate that. I love the idea of reverence. I don't know that I've used that word. I think that what I want to share about the records now, just to kind of help people have some reverence, right? So we talked about this being a spiritual realm or a spiritual plane or like a repository. It's like it's a sacred repository of information. And so we don't approach it as if we're just, kind of doing an internet search. It's actually like what is what is worth accessing? What deserves our attention? Where are we ready to receive guidance? Right? That's a good question for people in front of the records. And the records themselves are found in many different traditions. They may not be called the Akashic records. Akasha is a Sanskrit word for sky, so it's like because this is a creative, generative, um, inspired. So often, if you read about reading the records, they'll talk about the information coming down. So it's almost like it comes down from the sky. But, several traditions talk about the book of life, right? Which is like you can look and find evidence of souls' journeys and archetypal stories. There is a Hindu, not I think they're called nadi palms, where Shiva was said to write the life of people on these nadi palms, and you can go and you can read your life, right? And
Wow.
so, yeah, so it is a deep lineage, right? And so we do access them through a prayer. And I happen to access through a Mayan lineage that I was taught by my mentor, Vanessa Rodriguez, who was taught by her mentor, so it's a lineage that's passed down. I do believe that anyone can read the records. There are books out there to help you. For me, I needed support and mentorship because I think you're accessing something quite powerful. And so to do that, um, I just feel like guidance, a teacher, someone who's like, yes, that, no, not this. I actually started, Beya, I don't know if you know this, I started um, listening to my mentor's podcast, and
Uh-huh.
she would do monthly readings for the whole. And I was like, those are wildly accurate to my life. What is that? And I kind of thought to myself, well, at some point, I hope she'll read my records, right? Just listening to her podcast. And then I was in this period of time of like, oh, like something wants to come through me, something wants to happen, and just following different signals. And I got back to her website and I was like, oh, I want her to read my records. That's what I'm going to do. But she was on maternity leave. And so she was unavailable. And I'm like, hmm. So I just like kind of went, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to internet search. I want someone to read my records or something. Um, and I found it was for me, it felt important to learn if I could from a woman of color. So I found another woman of color who did a training and she said, I didn't know that I wanted to be trained. I wanted to be read. She's like, well, anyone who does my training, they have to read this book by Linda Howe.
Wow, I
So
love this.
so I'm like, I can read a book. That is what I can do. Like, that's easy. I'll wait till Vanessa's off maternity leave. I'll read a book. I started reading the book. The book says, read for yourself. So I started doing that and started having like really impactful experiences. And then it said, just read for your friends and family. And I was like, okay, really close people I'll read for and just see what happens. And they started having really meaningful experiences. And I was like, okay, this is going to be something. So I need some help. And so that's when I sought the mentoring and support and started kind of reading for people on a volunteer basis for quite a bit of time. And then now I feel like I have like enough of the background, to be like, okay, I'll read for people. But it felt really organic. I didn't set out to be like, oh, I'm going to read people's records, right? Or I'm going to
Mhm.
offer this service. It felt like, wow, something really powerful is happening here. I should probably get some support. And then, of course, offer it to anyone who wanted to do that. So,
Yeah, and you often talk about following that thread, right, in
hmm
your life.
hmm
You're not sure where it's gonna lead, and you're kinda, like, pulling at this thread, and you're kind of letting it guide you and lead you along. So first you're seeking it for your own self, then you're like, "Of course I can read a book. I'm a curious person. I love reading. I got my license. First thing I do is go to the library. I can read a book, right?"
right. right.
And now here we are, and we get to benefit from this beautiful practice that you've cultivated.
Yeah. So we are listeners. We are about to go do Beya's records, and again, I'm just gonna like walk you through the process. Again, we're gonna do that off mic. But what we'll do is Beya and I will do a little bit of centering so that we feel connected to ourselves and to each other, and then I'll read a prayer and I will ask permission to open Beya's records. Again, this idea of reverence. So it's a prayer that you say to ask. You don't kind of expect. And then Beya and I will be in a conversation with her guides about any questions she wants to bring. And that's the thing with the records. Like you can bring whatever questions you would like to bring. Now, some questions are better than others, right? So like just to say out loud, I say two things. One is don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Like things you might expect, open ended questions. How, what, those kind of questions. Things like when can get a little dicey because they're often like, we want to force something like, when will this happen for me? Sometimes they'll answer, sometimes they won't. Most of the time, they're not going to give you like a on August 26th at 9 a.m. You can ask yes, no questions, but again, that might not be what they want to answer. My experience is like when people ask yes, no questions, that they answer something slightly to the side of that, and we just got to go with it. Um, and so we'll just be in conversation with, with your guides based on the questions you're at. I will give you the information I'm given. And then that often leads to more questions or how to understand something. Like I said, for me, the records show up primarily as images or short phrases or impressions. Um, but they come in different ways for different people. And of course, I ask anyone I read with to pay attention to what's coming up for them too, right? So you might see images, you might have understanding that I don't have. And so it's really a dialogue back and forth. It's not just kind of a one way reading, it's a dialogue back and forth, and we ask more questions. Anything else you might say about a reading, Bea, before we do yours, just to
I love that piece that you just added, that it is a dialogue. So also as someone being read to, paying attention to my body, its responses, and maybe any images or thoughts that might also be coming up. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's coming through me, but you're the one the information is for. And so you might have a lot like this is really a lot of like mutual kind of collaboration and understanding. You will understand things I will not understand, right? I don't know why a butterfly is important, for example, right?
Mhm.
And so it's a back and forth. So, listeners, we're going to pause you. Bay and I are going to go do a reading, and then we will come back afterwards just to chat a little bit. Okay, talk to you soon. We are back after our reading. And so Bay and I have just done an Akashic Records reading for her. And we're just, I just want to say, I wonder if the listener will hear. I think we're both a little softer. And,
Ooh,
we're in a sacred space together. And so we're just going to maybe talk about it a little bit here, but also honor that we just, did something pretty magical and special together and kind of go from there.
absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you
Mm,
so
mhm.
much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
thank you, thank you.
Mm, you are so welcome. It was really lovely. It was a beautiful reading. And yeah, some good stuff happened. And I wonder Maybe we'll start with how you're feeling now. So this was like to give people an introduction to the records. And so you've just had a reading, and how are you feeling now?
I feel really good. I think one of the things that we kind of keep harping on is the fact that this is a tool of support, right?
Hmm.
And so it feels very wonderful to feel
Hmm.
supported,
Yeah. Yeah.
to feel supported. Mhm.
I also feel really good. I also, and
Yay.
yes, so it's lovely. I feel like one of the like again, what I'm just gonna say what it is. We stepped into kind of this a healing frequency, right? And so we kind of moved into a bit of an altered state together, and it actually feels good in the body. My husband, Gibran, who he says it's like my soul got a bath after being in the records. So
Wow.
it's a really interesting. I feel great after doing it, and you might think after channeling something, or if you're an introvert like me, like sometimes, kind of this intensity can feel draining, but actually I always feel really, really good. It's like it's like we were just in a nurturing, healing space. And so afterwards, um, one tends to feel pretty good. Pretty,
I'm so happy to hear that. I think I was under the impression that it would have a different source of
mm,
feeling for you as
yeah.
someone channeling, but this is great. This actually almost illustrates the beauty and sacredness of it.
Yeah, I feel fantastic. It's really kind of amazing. It's really kind of
Wow.
amazing how nourishing and replenishing it is for me. Um, so we got done with the reading, and you said that was practical. I would love for you to say more because, of
Yes,
course, we
yes.
we just talked how
Mhm.
10 minutes ago for the people listening, and said, well, it's not always practical. It's more,
Mhm.
like orienting and
Mhm.
strategic. But so I'd love to hear anything you want to say about that.
Absolutely. So you have a lot of context for my life. I'm doing the luminosity intensive. I am sharing, every week with this
Uh-huh.
cohort some of the challenges that I'm dealing with. And yet you would still not know how impactful those symbols and messages
Mm,
were from our reading without the context that I have. And so I think for me, it might have looked like a symbol or just a simple
uh-huh.
phrase, but for me, I'm holding all of the context of what it means.
Right.
And so for me, it did land in a very practical way.
That is so helpful. That is so helpful for me to hear. You're right, because they are simply symbols to me, but you're right, you're holding the
Mhm.
context. And this is a
Mhm.
conversation, so it comes in, but you know where to place it. You
For
know how to make
sure.
sense of it.
For sure. So even though in this season we're checking in often because I'm part of your luminosity program, I'm still holding the context of my life. And so for you, you're like, probably like, does that resonate to you as you're
Absolutely.
sharing out?
Yes, exactly.
And I'm happy to share that not only did it resonate, but it feels the thread of so many
Mm,
other things I'm working through in this very moment. So it felt
great.
very
Oh,
practical to me and
ah,
very relevant. Mhm.
Oh, I love hearing that. That makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. I just hadn't thought about it in that way. I feel like the readings are, you don't want to make promises to people, but they're almost always powerful for people, like, because it is about you, right? It is like your guides are showing up for you. And you actually, in this reading, had a very clear guide show up, which is interesting
Yeah.
because that's not always what happens.
That's
Um,
right. And it's not what happened the last time we were together. Actually, I can confess that it was one of those moments where I was skating around a decision that I needed to make. And so
mhm,
I've shared previously the advice that I shared with your listeners because I have attempted to do that, right? And so
right.
here I was seeking advice on something that I pretty much knew what I needed
Uh-huh.
to do next. And
Mhm.
so in that reading, it was the same message. And you came back to me laughing, like, I'm so sorry, I have to tell you again. But They just keep repeating the same message, and we kind
Right.
of like, "Okay, so that's the message of the moment." And in that session, the guide that showed up was actually in disguise. And
Oh,
you
wow.
and I talked a lot about what that might mean for me in that moment in time and why they decided to show up disguised.
Uh-huh.
Versus
Uh-huh.
today, they were much more willing to kind of show their face, and we got a
Yes.
clear outline, and you even felt the energy of the type of guide that they
Mhm.
were, which left me with tons of context that I could
Great.
work with, and that really resonated with me. And so, almost like a totally different experience from the last time that we worked together in this way.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. Yeah, your guide was front and center today, just like, "Here it is. Here we are.
Uh
Here's what's
huh.
happening," in a really beautiful way, and I think you're right. I mean, well, it's a year later, right? You've done a year's more worth of work. You came in also, like you said before, kind of skating around, but getting a message that you needed, and then now but it's like you're really facing things, right? Like, that's what you're up to in the world is really moving your own personal and interpersonal work forward, and so they'll meet you right where you are.
That's right. They will
Yeah.
meet you right where you are. And I love this idea of being able to work with this information almost like in the same way that you would with a compass, right? And
Mhm.
so being able to say, okay, this is another way to perhaps guide me or even affirm what I may be pouring into next. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of how I'm taking it today.
Great.
And at the same time, I'm super grateful because it just felt like another deep level of support that I don't often
Ah.
tap into, or or even as someone that has a daily practice,
Mhm.
I think it still feels so miraculous to know how tangible it actually is. Like it's
Right.
there and it's alive, and I can call it
Mm.
in this way and it will show
Right.
up.
Right.
And it might have
Right.
answers. Not only will it show up, it might talk to me and have answers, you know? So that
Right.
feels profound.
Yeah. Oh, I just really felt that when you said it, like, often when we reach for support, like, we kind of hope we'll hope we'll get support, but you're right. In the records, we will receive support and love
That's
and
right.
guidance. Like that is what they're here to do, and those guides are here to do that for us. And so it's like a when can you say that's a sure thing? I will get supported, which
That's
is
right.
really nice.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes it could be stern guidance.
Sure.
You know, and that's what I received last year. And it was like, okay, let me go do the thing.
Mhm.
I receive it. I receive the message now. I'm ready to receive it. And today, perhaps we can call it softer, but it's
Mm.
still a very affirming and discerning message.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no lack of clarity, right? It was
Mhm.
it was very clear. I'm curious, it's interesting that you said that. I'm thinking about Baya now, like the after the records reading, because my
Mhm.
sense is that it's really important that you have these daily practices because you'll need to like integrate, right?
Mhm.
So, the records could just be like, we talked about this kind of psychic slot machine. You go and like, oh, what do I get? And then like
Yeah.
you just keep kind of going on with your life. But this daily practice you have now helps you kind of integrate, keep it fresh, keep it straight, keep it in front of your mind's eye. It's not as if like if people come to the records and they forget about it and don't do anything about it, like the guides aren't mad at you. They're not going to punish you the next time. They're going to be open, but there is something really about the integration of what you learned. And then that makes your next reading even richer, even deeper. They can give
Agreed.
you any more.
I like the word deeper.
Mhm.
And so perhaps you can ignore and not integrate or dismiss it, but I do feel that it would just be such a loss because you're getting this opportunity to be in relationship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so by accepting and integrating the messages that you receive, you're also accepting the invitation to be in relationship with this spiritual force that is there to guide and support you, and that wants
Right.
nothing more than to do that.
Right. Right. Wants your best and highest good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And, some of us are really lucky that we are surrounded by people who want our best and highest good. And some of us like struggle, like we're born into
Mhm.
families or we haven't quite found the friends or, it's hard at work. It's always really wonderful to have a place where you can lean into, you can lean
Absolutely.
into others wanting your best and highest good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think what I'll do next is after we wrap up, I'll likely sit with my journal
Hmm.
and try to make more sense of some of the
Uh-huh.
messages I received. And typically, after doing something like this, for me, I try my best to also pay attention to my dreams because
Yes. Good.
oftentimes those will be another thread that
Right.
continue the story of today. And so I'm excited to journal, spend some time thinking and reflecting on the messages I received. And I'm going to try my best to get some good sleep tonight to see if
Good.
there's other messages that might pour through from my dream
Great.
space.
Wonderful, wonderful. That sounds perfect, and it sounds really, really good, Bea. And, yeah, I think, tonight, today, tomorrow, and just know, I mean, I think my experience is that, and you took notes
Mhm. Yeah,
during your record session. I go back to mine. I go back to my notes and like look them because sometimes things unfold for weeks or months, right? Like something
that's
didn't make
right.
sense, but it does. So these can have some long-term things. I'm going to let you go so you can do a little integration.
Oh,
But
thank you so much.
I think maybe I try to give a practice after each of these
Uh-huh.
podcasts. So I'm trying to think of what is the practice I might recommend because you have so many practices. There was a purple flower that showed up in your reading,
That's
and I
right.
said to you, "Keep your eye out for that." And so I
Yes.
think the practice I will share with folks is to for the rest of this day, whenever you're listening to this, for the rest of this day, see everything as meaningful and see if there's something that catches your attention, you know. Could be a purple flower, it could be something else, but look for meaning in the rest of your day and see if you can follow it. So,
I love that. Thank you
yeah,
so,
yeah.
so much. Thank you for sharing your gift with us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Bea, for joining me. It's been so great. The reading was great. I feel great. It's so good to have you on. And as we were talking right before the reading, but after we'd stopped recording, I'm like, oh, Bea, I have to have you on again. We have more things to talk about. So, so friends, Bea might be on again if she will do that. Looks like I'm getting a heart, so hopefully she will. And maybe we'll talk about tarot. Maybe we'll have you on and talk about tarot and like a little bit of your practice there because I know a lot of the listeners are into tarot, so that could be really interesting.
I love it.
All right. Thank you, listeners. If you want to book a reading with me, of course, just go to TuesdayRivera.com. It's right under the Akashic Readings, and we can get you set up and would love to read for folks if they're interested. If you have any questions, you can send us an email at hello@TuesdayRivera.com. If you have any feedback about the podcast, usually everyone says rate, review, subscribe. Please do those things. But mostly, if you like this episode, please share it with someone who you think could benefit or has interest or has said the word Akashic Records to you. So thank you, Beya. It's been so good to be on with you.
Thank you so much.
I'll talk to people soon.